He returned after 1 full year away from home, walking softly on the old cracked road that led to the land he loved more than anything. A single backpack hung from his shoulder, and his face looked tired, like someone who had fought a long battle inside his own body and won, but lost too many things along the way. The last time he had walked on this same road, he was sick, scared, and unsure if he would ever come back. He remembered locking his little wooden house, touching the door gently the way someone touches a memory, and telling himself that the HOA would keep the place safe while he went for treatment. He remembered promising himself that when he returned, he would fix the porch, plant new flowers, and repaint the rooms that still smelled like his childhood. He thought his land would wait for him, silent and safe, exactly the way he left it. He believed it because this was the place his father built with his own hands, the last real piece of family history he had. But when he turned the corner, when his shoes scraped the dust of the final bend, his heart stopped, and his breath vanished like wind. The place he saw was not home anymore. His old wooden house was gone. Completely gone. In its place stood 3 massive luxury mansions, bright lights glowing from tall windows, shining like the homes of rich strangers. Cars were parked perfectly in the driveways. Decorators walked in and out of open doors carrying shiny lamps, large mirrors, and expensive furniture. The ground where his father once planted vegetables was now covered with white stone tiles. His father's favorite old oak tree was cut down, replaced by a fancy metal sculpture. Fences he never built surrounded the land. Security guards stood near the gate with sunglasses and radios, like this was private property owned by someone important. And hanging high above everything was a giant HOA banner that said in bold letters, "Welcome to Maple Crest Estates, new model homes." He stood still, frozen like someone punched his soul. He felt his chest tighten in slow, painful waves. His land, his father's land, his memories, his work, his roots, all gone like they never existed. His throat felt dry, his eyes burned, but he didn't cry. Not even a tear. He just stared, unable to understand how anyone had dared to touch something so personal, so sacred, without permission. As he stood there, trying to breathe through his shock, one HOA board member walked out from behind the gate with a cup of coffee in hand and a fake friendly smile on her face. She looked at him like he was a stranger she barely recognized. "Oh," she said lightly, almost cheerfully, "you're back early. We thought you weren't coming." Her tone felt like ice in his stomach. Early? He thought. He had been gone for a full year. A year of suffering. A year of fighting. A year of missing the land he loved. But she acted like his return was some small inconvenience. His fingers curled into fists, but he didn't shout. He didn't ask why. He didn't accuse anyone. Instead, he walked quietly toward the gate as if pulled by something deeper than anger. As if he already knew something the HOA did not. As if he had returned with a truth that could shake their world. His steps were steady, confident, controlled. The security guard tried to move in front of him, but the board member waved her hand. "Let him see," she said casually. "It's still technically his place." Technically. The word stung. But he said nothing. He walked through the gate, through the new stone path, and into the world built on top of everything he once loved. He entered the first mansion. It smelled of new paint, new money, new lies. He touched the wall slowly, his fingertips brushing over the smooth surface that covered the place where his father once hung family photos. Every step felt like walking on broken memories. He could almost see the old wooden floor beneath his feet, even though now it was covered by shiny marble. The HOA board members followed behind him, wearing stiff smiles, trying to act confident even though they kept watching his face nervously. One of them began talking loudly, filling the air with excuses. "Since your land was unused for a long time, the HOA took the opportunity to develop something better," she said proudly. "This is for community growth. You should be happy. These homes are already sold to wealthy buyers. It increases everyone's property value." Another board member added, "And don't worry, you can visit anytime. We don't mind." Visit. They said it like he was a guest. Like he was a tourist. Like he didn't belong here anymore. But he wasn't listening to their excuses. He was looking at the wiring on the ceiling, The water pipes running along the walls, the foundation corners, the placement of saw lines, tiny details most people never notice. But he noticed everything. Because he knew his land better than anyone. And every detail he saw told him the same thing. Everything here was built illegally. Every pipe was installed without his signature. Every wall was raised without his consent. Every inch of earth they touched belonged to him. And the most unbelievable part was this. The HOA didn't even realize they were giving him all the proof he needed to destroy them completely. As they kept talking, one board member finally let out a small laugh. "Don't worry," he said casually. "You weren't here for a year. Legally, we had the right." The man stopped walking. Slowly, he turned around, and for the first time since he arrived, he looked directly at them. His eyes were calm, steady, and cold. "You have no idea," he said softly, "what you just did." The room went silent. Even the decorator paused, holding a vase in his hands. For the first time, the board members looked unsure. Something in his tone, something in his eyes, told them this was not going to be simple. This was not going to be easy. This was not going to end the way they expected. He walked outside again, this time slower, memorizing everything. The position of the mansions. The exact spots where trees used to stand. The places where the land sloped. The locations of new fences. He looked at every detail like an investigator collecting clues at a crime scene. Not a single sound came from him. But inside him, a storm was building. One made of betrayal, anger, and something even stronger, determination. He walked to the far back of the property where his father had once kept an old wooden shed. It was gone too, replaced by a gardening shack full of HOA tools. He opened the door, looked inside, and quietly closed it again. He didn't need the shed. He only needed one thing, proof that the land was still his. And he already knew where that proof sat waiting. Without saying another word, he walked back to the road. The HOA members stood there watching him nervously. He didn't look at them. He didn't ask a single question. He simply got in his car, started the engine, and drove away. But he didn't drive away like someone defeated. He drove away like someone who knew he was coming back with something they couldn't fight. As the car disappeared down the road, the board members whispered to each other. Why didn't he yell? Why didn't he argue? Why didn't he ask questions? Why wasn't he angry? But they didn't understand. He wasn't staying silent because he was weak. He was staying silent because he already had a plan forming in his mind. A plan that would hit them harder than anything they ever imagined. A plan that would turn their pride into fear. A plan that would change everything. He drove straight to his cousin's small office in the next town. His cousin was a land surveyor, someone who handled old maps, boundary lines, and property documents. When he walked in, his cousin looked up in surprise. "You're back," he said softly. "Finally." But when he saw the look in his eyes, his smile faded. What happened? Without speaking, he dropped his backpack on the table and sat down. Then he told him everything. Every detail. Every mansion. Every fence. Every lie. His cousin's face went still. Not shocked, but angry. Deep angry. Without another word, he walked to the corner of the office and pulled out an old wooden file box covered in dust. He placed it gently on the table, like he was placing something sacred. "This," his cousin said quietly, "is what your father left behind." The man opened the box and felt his breath catch. Inside were old papers, faded maps, boundary certificates, and a document he had seen only once before, an agreement his father had signed with the county years ago. A permanent protection clause. It stated clearly that the land could never be sold, touched, developed, leased, or changed without the owner's direct signature. Not the HOA. Not the county. Not anyone. Only him. He held the document in his hands, feeling the rough texture of the old paper, running his fingers over the familiar handwriting of his father. It felt like his father was speaking to him from the past. His cousin leaned forward and said quietly, "They built mansions on land they do not own." The man lifted his eyes slowly. "No," he whispered, "they built mansions that now legally belong to me." And in that moment, the storm inside him settled. Not calm, but focused. Not soft, but sharp. He knew exactly what he had to do next. And the HOA had no idea that the man they tried to push aside was coming back stronger than they could ever imagine. Because he wasn't just fighting for land. He was fighting for his father's legacy. And he was ready for war. He walked deeper into the mansion, moving slowly like someone stepping through the ashes of his own past, his fingers gently brushing the smooth, cold walls that had stolen the place where his memories once lived. Every corner he looked at felt wrong, like someone had erased the life he once had and painted their own picture on top of it. But he didn't show the pain on his face. His eyes stayed calm, steady, sharp, collecting everything silently while the HOA board members walked behind him pretending nothing serious had happened. One of them pointed toward the kitchen proudly, saying they had improved the space, as if they had done him a favor. Another talked about the modern layout, bragging about how buyers loved the upgrades, like he should clap for their achievement. But their voices felt far away to him. All he could hear was the echo of his father's laugh, the sound of his mother cooking in the old kitchen, the creak of the wooden floor where he used to sit when life was simple and safe. Now the only thing that touched his heart was the cold emptiness of a place that didn't belong to him anymore, at least, not physically. But emotionally, spiritually, and legally, it was still his. The HOA didn't understand that. They didn't understand him. They only understood money, power, and pride. He noticed the way the electrical lines ran differently than before, how the main water pipe crossed the exact spot where his father told him never to dig because an old tree's roots protected the soil. He noticed the foundation corner near the staircase, tilted slightly because the ground wasn't leveled correctly. He noticed the fence outside didn't match the legal boundary line printed on the county's old property map. And as he saw all these things, he didn't feel broken anymore. He felt focused. He felt something inside him rise slowly, like a sleeping lion opening its eyes. The man walking beside him, the same board member who once bragged about protecting the community, now talked with a cold confidence. When you left for a year, the HOA declared this land inactive, he said. It gave us the right to use it for expansion. You should have been more responsible. The words sliced through the air like knives. But the man didn't respond. He didn't need to, because he wasn't listening for the excuses. He was listening for the mistakes. Mistakes they didn't even know they were confessing. Another board member stepped closer and smirked. Honestly, don't feel bad. These homes are worth millions now. Your old house was falling apart. This is much better. Better. They used the word better for something built on top of his father's hands, his family's memories, his childhood dreams. He kept walking, his silence making them uncomfortable. He stopped near the back window and looked out at the large backyard where his father once buried their old family dog under a shade tree. That tree was gone, cut down like trash. A swimming pool sat there now, sparkling under the sun. Something twisted deep inside his chest, but still, he didn't cry. He didn't speak. He didn't let them see the storm inside him. The same smirking board member finally laughed quietly and said, "Look, don't worry. You weren't here for a year. Legally, we had the right to treat the land as abandoned." That was when he turned around. Slowly, calmly. The kind of calm that makes the other person feel fear before they even know why. His eyes were not soft anymore. They held something old, something heavy, something sharp. And with a voice so quiet that the room itself seemed to hold its breath, he said, "You have no idea what you just did." The board members froze. Something in his tone felt dangerous, not violent, but powerful. A quiet warning from a man who knew more than he was showing. And in that moment, they realized they had misjudged him. They thought he was weak, lonely, broken after a year of sickness. Someone they could push aside. Someone who would accept whatever they told him. But now, standing in front of them with eyes full of hidden fire, he looked like someone they should have never provoked. The quiet ones are always the ones you should fear. One of the board members forced a smile. "Come on. Don't be dramatic. It's not that serious." But the way he stared at them, without blinking, without emotion, made her step back slightly. He walked out of the mansion slowly, every step controlled. The board members followed awkwardly, unsure if they should speak or stay silent. They didn't understand that he was memorizing every detail, building a map inside his mind, one he would use against them soon. Outside, he walked along the driveway, looking at the brand new bricks that covered the spot where his father once parked the old red truck. He looked at the new metal gate that cut through the line where his land naturally sloped. He looked at the security post built right over the area where he and his father buried old family photos to protect memories under the earth. All gone. All replaced. But every change they made was a mistake that would come back to bite them. Because they built everything without knowing the truth. They built everything without checking the one file that mattered. They built everything without understanding the one law that protected him more than he ever realized. And he held that truth inside him like a loaded weapon. As he walked toward the exit gate, the board members followed nervously. One finally asked, "Are you okay?" He didn't answer. He didn't even look at them. He simply kept walking, leaving their question hanging in the air like a thread cut in half. Another board member rushed ahead of him and tried to block the gate. "If you're planning to cause trouble, just remember, you were gone. You were absent. That gives us authority." He stopped right in front of the gate, the sunlight catching the side of his face, making the calm rage in his eyes shine. "Authority," he whispered. "You think you understand authority?" They swallowed hard, something in their chest tightening. He stepped forward, forcing the board member to move aside. Without raising his voice, without threatening anyone, without showing a single crack in his expression, he said quietly, "This land remembers my father. And soon, the law will remember me." Then he walked out of the gate, the same gate that didn't exist when he left a year ago. As he stepped back onto the road, he didn't turn around. He didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing his face again. He only walked forward, each step filled with purpose, like a man going to take back something sacred. And the HOA members watched him go, feeling a strange chill in the air, because for the first time, they felt something they weren't used to feeling. Not control. Not confidence. But fear. A quiet fear. A fear that told them something had gone terribly wrong. A fear that whispered to them that the man they underestimated was about to become the nightmare they created with their own hands. And as he disappeared around the corner, the wind pushed the HOA banner slightly, revealing the words "Model Homes for Sale." Those homes, those mansions, were not theirs anymore. They just didn't know it yet that he drove straight through the quiet highway with the same calmness he showed at the mansion. But inside his heart a storm was rising, slow and powerful, like a wave preparing to break. The sky outside was soft and gray, the kind of sky that made the world look heavier, and every passing tree reminded him of the land he lost or thought he lost. But the more he drove, the more another feeling replaced the sadness, determination, sharp and cold. He kept seeing the mansion walls in his mind, the fences that didn't belong, the pool built over his childhood memories, and the smug smiles of the HOA board who believed he had no voice, no power, no future. They didn't know anything about him. They didn't know anything about his father. They didn't know the one truth that would break their world apart. When he reached the small old building where his cousin worked, he parked without hesitation. He didn't waste a second. He walked inside with steady steps, the smell of old paper and ink filling the air, the smell of things that were real, honest, and untouched by greed. His cousin looked up from behind a desk cluttered with maps and land surveys, his eyes widening in surprise but softening with warmth. "You're back," he said, but the smile faded when he saw the pain quietly sitting behind the man's eyes. "What happened?" The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he dropped his keys on the desk with a soft clink and sat down slowly, like the weight of everything finally settled on his shoulders. Then he spoke, but his voice didn't shake. It didn't break. It came out heavy, controlled, cold, like someone who had accepted the truth but wasn't willing to surrender to it. He told his cousin everything, the mansions, the fencing, the guards, the lies, the way the HOA acted like they owned him, like they owned his father's land, like they could decide the future of something sacred without even thinking twice. His cousin didn't interrupt. He only listened, his jaw tightening, his eyes slowly turning darker with anger. When the man finished talking, silence filled the room like thick smoke. Then the cousin stood up and walked toward an old cabinet in the corner. He pulled out a wooden file box, older than both of them, with scratches on the top and corners worn down from years of use. The cousin placed it gently on the desk, almost like he was placing a treasure. "This," he said quietly, "is what your father left." The man's breath caught. His father's handwriting. His father's signature. His father's memories. All inside a dusty wooden box. He opened it slowly, his fingers touching the rough wood. Inside were documents wrapped in cloth, maps rolled carefully, letters folded neatly, and one thick, yellowed envelope sealed with wax that carried his father's initials. His chest tightened, but this time not from pain. From love. From connection. From a reminder that even in death, his father still protected him. His cousin leaned over and pulled out the most important document. A legal agreement signed decades ago. A permanent protection clause. A clause that stated the land could never be developed, sold, leased, destroyed, built on, or altered without the direct signature of the owner. Not the HOA. Not the county. Not any third party. Only him. Only his family. And the signature space for the owner was empty. His breath stopped. His heart pounded. The paper felt heavy in his hands, like it carried the weight of his father's last wish. His cousin spoke softly but firmly. "They built on your land illegally. Every mansion, every wall, every pipe, every inch. They broke the law. And they didn't just break any law. They broke his law." Hearing the word "his" made the man's throat tighten. His father. The man who raised him. The man who taught him how to stand when life tried to push him down. The man who told him that land is not just soil. It is family. It is identity. It is history. He looked at his father's old papers with shaking fingers, feeling his father's presence like a hand on his shoulder. He whispered softly, almost as if speaking to someone who was still in the room, "Dad, why didn't you show me this before?" But deep down, he knew the answer. His father trusted that the land would always be safe. He trusted people. He trusted rules. He trusted the idea that neighbors would honor boundaries. He never imagined someone would be bold enough, selfish enough, greedy enough to steal everything. His cousin placed a hand on his shoulder. "This is bigger than you think. They committed a major violation. Legally, everything they built on your land belongs to you now." The man looked up, his eyes darkening with a mixture of pain and power. "Everything. Everything," his cousin repeated. "According to property law, anything built on land without the owner's permission automatically becomes the property of the landowner. Those mansions are yours. Every room, every tile, every piece of their pride." The man leaned back, letting the truth sink in. He wasn't just going to win. He already had. The HOA didn't even know they had built millions of dollars worth of property. For him. For free. They replaced his small wooden home with 3 giant mansions, thinking they were taking something from him. But in reality, they had given him more than he ever imagined. He closed his eyes, and for the first time since returning, the weight on his chest eased. Slowly. Like a door opening. Like a wound healing. He opened the old envelope with his father's initials. Inside was a letter written in his father's familiar handwriting. The ink was slightly faded, but every word felt alive. "If you are reading this, it means life has tested you. But remember, son, our land is not just land. It is our blood, our name, our history. Protect it. Honor it. And if someone tries to take it, do not fear. The law is on your side. And I am with you." His hands trembled. His vision blurred for a moment. His father was gone, but somehow, he felt closer than ever. Like his father knew this day would come. Like he knew someone would try to take what didn't belong to them. Like he knew his son would need this strength. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in his jacket pocket, close to his heart. His cousin finally broke the quiet. "What will you do now?" The man stood up slowly, his expression calm but filled with power that hadn't been there before. "I'm going to make them understand what they did." He gathered the documents, placed them neatly inside a folder, and slid it into his backpack. His cousin watched him with a mixture of pride and sadness. "They won't be ready for this," the cousin said. "No," the man replied, "they won't." He walked toward the door, feeling stronger with every step. The sadness he felt earlier had cooled into something sharper: purpose. The helplessness had turned into confidence. The fear had turned into fire. He walked out of the office and stood under the open sky, breathing deeply. The wind brushed his face, carrying with it the scent of dust, trees, and a familiar softness, the scent of home. He wasn't just returning to fight an HOA. He was returning to protect his father's legacy. And no board member, no security guard, no mansion buyer, no fake authority could stand against the truth he carried. He got into his car, started the engine, and looked at the road ahead. He whispered under his breath, "They think they built their future on my land. But they don't know. They built it for me." And with that, he drove off, heading straight toward the storm he was ready to control. He drove back toward the neighborhood with the same calm intensity he had carried since the moment he discovered the mansions. But now, every mile he crossed, every second that passed, the weight of truth in his backpack felt heavier, not in a painful way, but in a powerful way. He knew exactly what he had. He knew what those papers meant. And he knew that once he stepped into the HOA meeting room with the documents his father left behind, nothing would ever be the same again. The sky had turned darker, clouds gathering quietly as he approached the area, and the atmosphere felt thick, like the world itself was holding its breath for what was about to happen. He parked outside the HOA office, a small fancy building with glass walls and fake flowers on each side, made to look important but feeling empty and lifeless compared to the wooden box his father left him. He stepped out of the car and walked toward the entrance with slow, steady steps. Not angry, not rushed, just controlled. Completely controlled. Inside, the board members sat around the long table, talking loudly, laughing, drinking coffee, flipping through papers about new community projects, acting like nothing they did was wrong, acting like their world was safe, acting like they were untouchable. But the moment he entered, everything inside the room changed. Their voices died instantly. Their smiles faded. Their bodies stiffened like someone had pressed pause on their confidence. The HOA president cleared her throat and tried to smile, but her voice trembled slightly. "You came back." He didn't respond with a smile or a greeting. He simply walked to the center of the room and placed his backpack on the table. The sound of the zipper opening echoed loudly, louder than any voice inside the room. He pulled out the old documents, his father's maps, the protection clause, the boundary agreements, the county-certified signatures. Papers older than some of the board members sitting at the table. And he placed them one by one, slowly, carefully, like placing evidence in front of criminals. The room grew so silent that even the air felt afraid to move. One board member leaned forward with a frown, scanning the first page. Then the next. His eyes widened slightly, confusion turning to shock. This is impossible. Another board member grabbed the papers quickly, flipping the pages with shaky fingers. "Where did you get this?" He calmly answered, "From the person who built the land before you destroyed it." His voice wasn't loud, but it was heavy, so heavy that every word felt like it filled the room, pushing guilt into every corner. The HOA president straightened in her chair, trying to regain authority. "This doesn't change anything," she said, though her voice cracked. "We declared the land abandoned. We filed paperwork. We acted legally." The man looked at her with quiet fire in his eyes, then gently turned one of the documents toward her. The permanent protection clause signed by the county and his father decades ago. The line that said, "No construction or land alteration permitted without the owner's direct signature." The line under it was blank. Completely blank. His voice remained calm, almost too calm. "Show me where my signature is." The room collapsed into whispering panic. One board member stood up quickly. "This can't be real. This must be fake." He could have made these himself. The cousin's official seal on the documents, the county stamps, the notarized signatures, all stared back at them like cold truth. Another board member flipped through the pages desperately. This is decades old. Why wasn't this in our files? The man took a slow breath, then spoke without raising his voice even once. Because this land never belonged to you. Not then. Not now. Not ever. His words hit them harder than shouting ever could. Their confidence broke. Their arrogance cracked. Their faces turned pale, but he wasn't finished. Not yet. He slid another paper forward. This one showing the law clearly. Any structure built on another person's land without permission becomes the property of the landowner. The room froze completely. The HOA president whispered, "You're saying, those mansions," he nodded once. "They belong to me." The silence that followed was unlike anything they had ever felt. It wasn't just fear. It was realization. Realization that everything they bragged about, everything they sold, everything they built, everything they celebrated, all of it now belonged to the very man they tried to erase. The HOA vice president suddenly pushed back his chair, panic filling his voice. "This could ruin us. Do you understand what you're doing?" He looked directly into the man's eyes, and for the first time, the board saw something they hadn't noticed before: strength. Real strength. The kind of strength that doesn't need to shout. The kind that grows from pain and becomes unstoppable. "You ruined yourselves," he answered. "No anger. No revenge. Just truth." The HOA president grabbed her forehead, breathing fast. "The buyers, the contracts, the money we took. This could become lawsuits, penalties." "It will," he said softly. One board member tried to play innocent. "Look, maybe we can fix this. Maybe you can let us keep the mansions, and we can offer you something in return." He raised an eyebrow slightly, not impressed. "You want to negotiate with stolen property?" She swallowed hard. We didn't think you would come back." Those words were a confession. A confession of greed. A confession of intention. A confession of everything wrong they had done. He leaned forward slightly, his voice low and steady. "That is your mistake. You thought I was gone. You thought I was weak. You thought this land didn't matter." His eyes hardened. "But this land carries my father's name. And you can't erase that." The HOA office felt smaller now, suffocating them with their own guilt. One board member broke into tears quietly. Another held his head in his hands. Another stared at the documents like they were death sentences. The man gathered the papers slowly, placing them back into his backpack with the same calmness he had walked in with. "A lawyer will contact you tomorrow," he said. The president looked up desperately. "Please, can we discuss this?" He shook his head once. "No. The time to talk was before you built over my memories." He walked toward the door, every step heavy with purpose, every breath filled with strength he didn't know he had until now. Before leaving, he turned around one last time. "You didn't just take my land. You took my father's legacy." The room went silent again, every board member frozen, unable to respond. "And now," he said softly, "the law will take everything back." Then he walked out, leaving the HOA office in complete silence, filled with panic, fear, regret, and the heavy realization that the man they underestimated had become the force they should have never challenged. When he stepped out of the HOA office, the cold evening air hit his face, but it felt nothing like cold. It felt clean, like the world outside had more honesty than the people inside that room. He stood still for a moment in the parking lot, staring at the sky turning orange and purple, letting the wind pull the heavy stress from his chest. For the first time since he returned, he didn't feel lost. He didn't feel broken. He didn't feel helpless. He felt like someone was standing behind him. The old strength of his father, the weight of his memories, the truth blazing in his hand. All of it pushed him forward. And he knew the storm he started inside the HOA office was only the beginning. The real explosion would come when the mansion buyers learned the truth. And he didn't have to wait long. The news traveled faster than he expected. The HOA president, in panic, had called an emergency meeting with the buyers, and by the next morning, cars lined up in the neighborhood like a funeral procession. But these were not people coming to mourn. These were people ready to erupt. He returned to the property quietly, parking near the edge of the road, watching from a distance as the crowd grew. Rich families wearing expensive clothes, angry men in suits, women holding paperwork, real estate agents sweating nervously. Every buyer who had invested in those mansions was now standing near the place they thought they owned. The HOA board stood in front of them, red-faced, tense, trying to calm the crowd. But the moment someone in the group spotted him, everything shifted. "That's him," a woman shouted, pointing. "That's the real owner." Heads turned. Dozens of eyes locked onto him. Some filled with hope, some with fear, some with frustration. The crowd separated, giving him a path like the ocean splitting for a storm. He walked forward slowly, the noise around him fading as the buyers looked at him, wanting answers and justice all at once. One buyer, a tall man in a navy suit, stepped forward first, his face tight with anger. "Is it true?" he demanded. "Are you the actual owner of this land?" The man didn't reply with pride or ego or joy. He simply nodded once. "Yes," he said quietly. The crowd erupted with voices, questions, shouts, disbelief, panic. "How is that possible? They told us they owned everything. We paid full price. We have contracts. This is illegal." The HOA president tried to raise her voice above the chaos, but nobody listened. They were done listening to her lies. They only wanted the truth now. And he gave it to them. Calmly. One sentence at a time. "My father built this land," he said. "He protected it with legal documents. Those mansions were built without my permission. My signature is required for anything. They never had it." Gasps spread through the crowd. Some people clutched their mouths. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Some looked like someone had just stolen years from their lives. One woman stepped closer, tears forming in her eyes. "But we moved here for peace. We bought our dream home. They told us everything was legal. They told us your land was abandoned." He felt her pain. He felt all of their pain. They weren't the villains in this story. They were victims too. The HOA had lied to them. And now they were stuck in the middle of a nightmare they didn't create. He met the woman's eyes gently. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said softly. "I'm not here to take your homes away." A wave of relief swept through the crowd, but it didn't erase their anger toward the HOA. Another buyer shouted, "But what happens now? Who do we even pay? Who owns what? What about our contracts?" The HOA president tried to speak again. "We can sort this out." "No," the man said, his voice deep and unshakable. "You've sorted enough." The crowd turned back to him, listening again, trusting him more than the people who had taken their money. He reached into his backpack, took out the documents his father left, and held them up so the buyers could see the county seals. "These papers say everything built here belongs to me," he said. "But I won't throw any of you out. I'm not here to ruin your lives. I know what it feels like to lose a home." The buyers looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. But then the anger returned. Anger directed at the HOA board who stood behind him, trembling. A man in a black jacket snapped, "So we paid them hundreds of thousands. But the property belongs to you? What does that make us?" Someone else shouted, "Victims. That's what we are." The HOA president finally cracked. Her voice trembled. Please let us explain." A buyer cut her off. "Explain what? That you stole land? That you sold property you didn't own? That you lied to everyone here?" The board flinched as if hit. Another buyer, a middle-aged father with 2 kids standing behind him, stepped forward, fury shaking in his voice. "You put my family's savings into a lie. You promised this was legal. You promised we'd be safe." The HOA members hung their heads, realizing they were about to face more than anger. They would face lawsuits. They would face penalties. They would face consequences they never imagined. The man, standing between the buyers and the HOA, took a slow breath. He didn't want chaos. He wanted fairness. He wanted dignity. He wanted the truth to save innocent people, not destroy them. So he raised his hand slightly, calming the crowd with nothing but quiet strength. "Listen," he said softly. I don't want to punish you. You trusted them. You believed them. You didn't steal anything from me. The buyers nodded slowly, some wiping tears from their eyes. But the law is clear, he continued. This land is mine. And everything built on it belongs to me. The HOA committed fraud. They'll face the legal consequences. And for now, until the court decides the final solution, you'll pay your rent to me. Whispering spread through the crowd. Shock, confusion, acceptance. Some buyers seemed relieved. Some seemed unsure. But none of them blamed him. He stepped closer to them, gentle but firm. I promise you, he said quietly, I will be fair. I will not hurt your families. You will stay in your homes. The buyers nodded, some even thanking him softly. But behind them, the HOA board members looked like their world was falling apart. The president whispered, barely audible, You're going to destroy us. He turned his head slightly, looking right into her eyes. No, he said. You destroyed yourselves. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Another board member leaned against the wall, shaking uncontrollably. Another whispered, We never thought he'd come back. He gave them one last look, calm, strong, unbroken. That, he said, was your biggest mistake. And as the buyers slowly approached him to discuss the next steps, the HOA board realized something terrifying. He wasn't just the landowner anymore. He was the man they had awakened. The man they underestimated. The man who would make them face every single consequence of their lies. The courtroom was colder than he expected, not because of the air conditioning but because of the weight of what was about to happen. As he walked inside with his cousin by his side, carrying the folder of his father's documents, every eye in the room followed him. The buyers, the HOA board, the lawyers, even the judge who looked over his glasses with curiosity, sensing this was not an ordinary case. The HOA sat together in the front row, pale and shaking. They looked smaller than before, their earlier arrogance crushed under the truth that hung above them like a storm cloud ready to burst. Some whispered nervously, some avoided looking at him, and some stared with a mixture of guilt and desperation. The mansion buyers filled the back rows, families holding hands, husbands comforting wives, mothers hugging children. They were scared, confused, unsure of what the outcome would be. They trusted him, but the fear of losing their homes sat heavy in their hearts. He took his seat quietly, placing the folder on the table in front of him. His heart was steady, his breathing calm. His father's words from the old letter still echoed inside him. Protect it. Honor it. When the judge finally called the case, the room fell silent, the kind of silence that presses on your chest, making it hard to breathe. The HOA's lawyer stood first, his voice shaky but trying to sound confident. He talked about abandoned land, community development, buyer protection, and miscommunication. But every word sounded weak, empty, desperate. The judge listened patiently, but his face remained stiff and unimpressed. When the HOA lawyer finished, the judge nodded once and turned his eyes to the man. Your turn, he said gently. The man stood up slowly, holding the old documents with respect, as if carrying something sacred. He didn't speak loudly. He didn't shout. His voice was calm, steady, almost peaceful, but every word carried the weight of truth. Your Honor, he said, handing over the papers. This is the original protection agreement my father signed with the county. This land cannot be touched without my signature. No one has it. No one asked for it. These mansions were built illegally. The judge's eyebrows rose as he scanned the pages. He read slowly, carefully, the room growing quieter with every turn of the page. Then the judge looked up. Do you have proof you are the rightful heir? The man nodded and handed over the inheritance documents, birth certificate, old land titles, everything his father kept locked away for a moment exactly like this. The judge examined them, his expression turning serious. The HOA's lawyer swallowed hard. The buyers leaned forward, gripping the seats tightly. The judge took a deep breath and leaned back in his chair. This, he said slowly, is very clear. The HOA board froze. They knew what was coming. They knew the truth was too strong to fight. The judge continued, his voice firm and steady. The land belongs entirely to him. It always has. The HOA violated multiple property laws. Everything built on his land belongs to him by default. Gasps erupted across the courtroom. Someone cried out softly. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." One HOA member covered her mouth, tears streaming from her eyes. Another slumped in his chair, staring at the floor, completely broken. The judge wasn't finished. "All contracts made between the HOA and the buyers are invalid," he said. A wave of panic swept through the room, but before fear could spread too far, the judge raised his hand. "However," he added, "the buyers are innocent. They acted in good faith. They will not lose their homes." Relief washed over the buyers like a warm summer rain. Some cried, some hugged each other, some bowed their heads in gratitude. The man felt a small ache in his throat watching them. He remembered the day he almost lost his own home, the day he returned to nothing but shock. He wouldn't let anyone else feel that same pain. The judge continued, turning toward the HOA. His voice hardened. "The HOA will be held responsible for fraud, illegal construction, misuse of authority, falsifying ownership, and violating county agreements." The HOA members looked like the air had been sucked out of their lungs. The president's hands shook violently. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Your Honor, we didn't know." The judge cut her off. "Ignorance is not an excuse. You stole someone's land. You built on it. You sold what wasn't yours." Her shoulders collapsed. Someone else began to cry. Another buried his face in his hands. The judge turned back to the man, his tone softening. "What do you request as a fair outcome?" The man took a slow breath. Every buyer watched him with hope. Every HOA member watched him with fear. He finally spoke. "They keep their homes," he said, nodding toward the buyers. "I don't want to throw anyone out. But since the mansions are legally mine, they will pay rent to me instead of the HOA." The buyers nodded quickly, almost gratefully. They were relieved. They knew he was being fair. The judge nodded. "That is reasonable." Then he turned to the HOA again. His voice was cold now. "And as for you, the HOA will pay all penalties, refunds, damages, and legal fees. Every cent." The HOA broke. Completely. The president sobbed openly. One board member whispered, "We're finished." Another closed his eyes, shaking his head slowly like someone sentenced to a fate he couldn't escape. The man didn't look at them with revenge in his eyes. He looked at them with something deeper, truth, dignity, and the quiet justice his father always believed in. The judge struck his gavel. "This court is adjourned." The buyers rushed toward him, thanking him, some with shaking hands, some with tears in their eyes. "You saved us. You protected us. You're a good man." But he only smiled softly, feeling nothing but calm acceptance. He didn't do it for praise. He didn't do it for revenge. He did it to honor his father. As he walked out of the courtroom into the soft afternoon light, he breathed deeply, the air feeling lighter than it had since he returned home. The HOA members walked out behind him, broken and defeated, understanding that this was the day their pride died. The day their lies collapsed. The day their power ended. And he walked away with something greater than victory. He walked away carrying his father's legacy safely in his hands, finally protected, finally honored, finally alive again. After the court ruling, after the buyers found safety, after the HOA collapsed under the truth and its own lies, the world around him felt strangely quiet. Not empty, just peaceful. Like the storm that had been roaring inside him for months finally lost all its power. He drove back to the land, the same land that had been stolen from him, built over, twisted into someone else's dream, but now returned to him in a way even he never expected. When he stepped out of the car, the sun was setting, sending long golden rays across the rooftops of the three mansions. Mansions that now legally belonged to him. Mansions built from arrogance, from greed, from lies, yet standing now as monuments to his father's protection and his own strength. The breeze brushed through the trees, the same trees he used to run past as a child. He walked slowly down the familiar path, though it looked different now. But even with all the changes, the land still recognized him. It still felt like home. He walked toward the first mansion, the soft sound of children laughing inside warming something in his heart. The family who lived there opened the door when they saw him outside and waved shyly. He gave a small polite nod before continuing. He didn't want praise. He didn't want attention. He just wanted to breathe again. He walked toward the second mansion, where a woman stood on the balcony watering flowers she planted to make the place feel like her own. She placed the watering can down when she saw him and whispered, "Thank you." He smiled gently and kept walking. He didn't need thanks. Their peace was enough. Their safety was enough. Their homes being protected, something he didn't have, was enough. He reached the far end of the land, where the biggest mansion stood, the one built directly where his father's house once stood. He stood still, staring at it, not with anger or sadness, but with acceptance. His father's house was gone, yes, but the earth beneath it was still the same earth his father walked on. The wind that touched his face was the same wind his father felt. The sky above him was the same sky his father looked at during quiet nights. The memories were still here. They were just layered under concrete and glass now. But nothing could erase them. Nothing. He walked to the backyard of the mansion, where the swimming pool shimmered under the evening light. This was where the old oak tree once stood, the one his father planted when he was born. For a long moment, he stared at the empty space. Then he knelt down and pressed his palm against the ground. He closed his eyes. And for the first time since coming home, he let himself feel everything. The grief, the loss, the memories, the love, the anger, the healing. A teardrop fell onto the soil. Not from weakness, but from connection. This was still his home. No court could change that. No mansion could erase that. No HOA could steal that. He whispered softly, "I'm back, Dad." The wind blew gently, brushing his hair like a warm hand, as if the land itself answered him. As he stood up, the sound of footsteps approached. He turned around and saw the HOA president walking slowly toward him, her face pale, her eyes swollen from crying, holding a brown envelope in her hands. She looked smaller than she ever had, stripped of power, stripped of pride. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the soft rustle of leaves. Finally, in a shaking voice, she said, "I came to apologize." He didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply waited. She swallowed hard. Tears spilled down her face. "We were wrong. We were blind. We were greedy. We thought you wouldn't come back. We thought we could get away with it." She held the envelope out with trembling hands. This contains the last of the HOA funds. The judge said it belongs to you now. I didn't want to send it through the lawyer. I wanted to give it to you, myself. He took the envelope silently, not because he needed the money, but because it closed the final door to everything they had done. She stepped back, wiping her eyes. "You didn't have to let the family stay," she said softly. "You could have taken everything from them. But you didn't." "Because they did nothing wrong," he said quietly. She nodded, her voice breaking. "You're a better person than any of us." He didn't respond to that. He didn't need to. She left slowly, disappearing down the road like a shadow fading into dusk. He turned back toward his land. His land. That word felt heavy in his chest, but not painful, just real. True. Earned. He walked toward the small patch where his father's old garden once grew. The soil was untouched there, still soft, still familiar. He knelt again and dug his fingers gently into the dirt. Tomorrow, he told himself quietly, he would plant a new tree. Not because it would replace the old one. Nothing could replace that. But because the land deserved new life. Because his father deserved to be remembered. Because he wanted something living on this earth that carried their name again. As the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, he stood tall, looking over the property. A soft smile touched his lips, small, quiet, but real. The mansions glowed with warm lights, families inside laughing, cooking, moving around safely, peacefully. And he realized something. They weren't just paying him rent. They were keeping his father's land alive. They were filling it with voices and warmth that the HOA's greed could never steal. He took a slow breath, feeling complete for the first time in years. The nightmares were over. The fight was over. The land was his. The legacy was his. The peace was his. As he walked back to his car, the night embraced him with a soft breeze. He looked over his shoulder one last time, his voice barely a whisper. "Rest now, Dad. I protected it." And with that, he left the land behind for the night. Stronger, calmer, and finally free, knowing that every sunrise from now on would rise over a land that no one could ever take away from him again.